that when it comes to Iowa as a whole, we need y'all to go out and vote. Don't sit at home. He said things like, making sure that you are making sure that you just stay in the game, that you continue on to not sit it out. Don't think for a moment that because I'm leading in the polls that somehow that's going to impact that you can sit out. So that shows me that President Trump, even though he has a huge lead, he's still concerned about what could happen in Iowa. So I'm watching that very closely. I'm also watching New Hampshire, where I think they just recently said that Nikki Haley was in like single digit shot at of being able to possibly take over President Trump. Not to mention, if Governor Chris Christie drops out, that's about 12 percentage points that may go to Nikki Haley. So it could be a little bit of a shakeup. You never know what's going to happen, but you don't not have primaries. That's just not an option.
Well, with that, let's start in Iowa. I personally believe that Ron DeSantis will come in third, and that will be the end of his campaign. I think that we've seen what this primary has shown us is that there are a lot of candidates who are just not ready for prime time. And we saw that in 2020 with the Democrats, for example, when everybody said, oh, Beto O'Rourke, he's this young and energetic candidate. He's going to be such a force in the Democratic Party. Nothing. Absolutely destroyed immediately. And in this race, if you look at February of last year, or even December of the year before, Ron DeSantis was within 5 or 6 points of Trump nationally. Since then, we've seen him plummet like a stone. I don't think that there's a path forward for him unless he has a strong showing in Iowa. I think it's not enough for him to just come in second in Iowa. He has to come in second, with some weight behind him. He has to come in within 10 points of Trump, let's say. But I don't see that happening. I think Trump's going to win Iowa by at least 25 points. And I think second place is going to go to Nikki Haley, probably with between 15 and 18% of the vote. And then you're going to see Ron DeSantis kind of limp in with 8 to 10% of the electorate. And that will be all that she wrote there. Going into New Hampshire, I don't think Chris Christie dropping out of the race will have the effect of boosting Haley, because the Chris Christie voters are very much just Chris Christie voters. Those are people who are anti-Trump, anti the Republican establishment, anti everything. And if you're not carrying that same anti hatred for Trump, you're not going to be a Trump supporter. But if Nikki Haley can get within single digits or shouting distance at Trump, and is coming off of 2 strong second place finishes going into South Carolina, that will be when the race shakes up. But do you think the Republican Party is ready for an Indian American woman to potentially be the nominee or potentially be the vice president under Trump? We saw Trump yesterday, I think, or the day before, tweeted out on Truth Social that Nikki Haley should be ineligible to run because her parents were immigrants. Do you think Republicans are really ready for Indian American vice president or presidential nominee?
Well, first, I think that's ridiculous to even say something like that. But secondly, absolutely. I mean, it was Republicans who were calling for Trump to pick Nikki Haley as his VP. So absolutely, we're not over here acting like the Democrats where we say we're all for one thing, and then the moment you throw Pete Buttigieg in, you just can't elect him. So we're not that. We're here. We want people who are going to do the job. And clearly, she's getting a lot of support. So I don't think the Republican Party is anti-Nikki Haley. That being said, I also want to address kind of how we look at Governor Chris Christie, and what he says. I feel like Governor Chris Christie's voice is necessary in our party. He holds people accountable. I don't necessarily agree with all of his policy positions, but I don't disagree with him saying things like, why are we not calling out the fact that we're missing someone from the debate stage? I don't disagree with him when he says things like, well, what about this policy over here that came from the previous administration? I don't really agree with that. If we can't disagree, particularly in our own party, then we're at a standstill. We're now acting like the other side. So I don't like the idea that if I hold you accountable, I'm somehow anti-you. I'm not anti-you. I don't know you. Most of these people we don't have any personal relationship with in order to be anti. So therefore, I'm in a situation where I feel like we've got to start changing the narrative and turning the curve on that and allowing us to have some type of disagreement even within your own party. So But that being said, I do think that President Trump is going to eventually be the nominee because clearly that's where the polls are pointing. But I won't be surprised if something else happens because when I talk to people on the ground, there are a lot of people who do not want Trump and they do not want Biden. So this is going to really make it very interesting in the general election to see if RFK, who's pulling from both sides, if he's able to pull enough to really alter or change the direction of the outcome. But we'll see how that goes.
I find it amazing that Trump's strategy for handling Chris Christie is Chris Christie will say, this guy is a felon, he's a danger to society, his own cabinet doesn't support him, Mike Pence doesn't want to be president, his defense secretary, his own attorney general don't want to be president, and then Trump's response is, fat ass, big fat person, big fat Chris Christie, just fat for no reason, big fat nasty sloppy, big fat ass Chris Christie, and that is it. That is all that he says. He doesn't even deny the stuff Chris Christie says. Is he big fat fatty fat ass fat, and it's effective. It works. It has worked thus far. It's almost as if Chris Christie should have got like lap band and 360 lipo to have a better chance in this election. But after the break, I want to talk about how do you think these criminal cases might impact the Republican primary field, because that's the point that Chris Christie has been trying to make, which is this guy might not even be the nominee because he might be in prison. We'll be back after the break. News and Talk 1380 WAOK.